For 30 years, I called a man Dad. I loved him, trusted him, built my entire identity around him. And then, a piece of paper told me everything I knew was a lie. I grew up in a small, sleepy town where everybody knew everybody's business, or at least I thought they did, and for most of my life I was that kid. The one with the perfect family. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. I had my mom, my dad, and me, the only child. We lived in this old brick house with a squeaky porch swing where Dad would drink his coffee every morning before work. Mom was the heart of the house, always cooking something, humming along 2 old songs on the radio. Dad was the steady one. The kind of man who'd fix your bike without you even asking, or stay up all night with you when you were sick. I idolized him. He wasn't just my father. He was my hero. Taught me how to ride a bike, how to drive, even how to grill the perfect burger. His words, not mine. And when people said we didn't really look alike, I'd laugh it off. I had Mom's hazel eyes, sure, but Dad's stubborn chin and, apparently, his terrible dance moves. From as far back as I can remember, we were tight. Family game nights, road trips, lazy Sundays, watching old movies. We were solid. I never had reason to doubt that the man who tucked me in at night was anything but my real dad. Mom and Dad's love story was one I'd heard 1,000 times. They met at a mutual friend's barbecue when Mom was 25 and Dad was 27. Mom said he made her laugh so hard she nearly spit out her drink. Dad said he knew she was the one the moment he saw her. He got married within a year. Growing up, I thought they were the blueprint for what a marriage should be. Mutual respect, shared jokes, small gestures of love. They held hands in public, for crying out loud. That's not something you see much after decades together. My extended family adored Dad too. My grandparents would say how lucky I was to have a man like him raising me. I believed it. But here's the thing about growing up in a perfect family. You never expect the cracks until they're right in front of you. And even then you tell yourself they're nothing. It started subtly. Around the time I turned 29, I began asking questions about my family history, was considering having kids, and thought it'd be smart to know about any genetic issues. I asked Mom about our medical background, but she always answered vaguely. Things like, "Oh, you're fine, honey. We've got good genes in this family." I didn't think much of it until I started piecing things together. First, there were the baby photos. Most of them showed Mom holding me, smiling proudly. But in some of the earliest ones, Dad wasn't there. When I asked why, Mom would shrug and say he was working a lot back then. It sounded reasonable. But the tone in her voice had this finality, like she didn't want me digging further. Then came the comments from family friends. At a wedding, a tipsy aunt, who always had something to say, leaned over and whispered, "You know you don't have a single feature from your dad's side? Not even his nose." I laughed it off, but her words stuck in my head like a splinter. Still, life was good. Dad and I were as close as ever. We'd talk almost every day, even after I moved to the city. If there was a secret, I didn't see it. Then something unexpected happened. A conversation that set this whole story in motion. One Sunday, I was visiting my parents for dinner. Dad had gone to the garage to fix something, and Mom and I were clearing the table. She was unusually quiet, and then out of nowhere she said, "You know, sometimes the past should stay in the past." I remember freezing, plate in hand. Okay, what does that mean?" I asked, trying to laugh. She just shook her head and changed the subject. I told myself it was nothing. But that night, lying in my old childhood bedroom, I couldn't stop replaying her tone, like she was warning me. And then, a week later, I got a birthday gift from a friend that would change my life. A home DNA test kit. At first I thought it'd be fun, just a silly way to find out if I had some exotic ancestry or a Viking warrior in the family tree. I had no idea it was about to detonate 30 years of my life. This is where things start to tilt, because once I spit in that tube, there was no going back. When the DNA kit first arrived, I honestly thought it was just going to be a fun little science project. I wasn't looking for drama. I wasn't hunting for skeletons in the closet. I figured I'd send off my sample, wait a few weeks, and then brag about being 2% something cool like ancient Iberian seafarer. I even joked about it with my parents over dinner. "Hey, maybe I'll find out we're royalty or something." Dad laughed and said, "Well, if you find any castles in your name, let me know." Mom smiled. but it wasn't the warm, crinkly-eyed smile she usually had. It was tight, controlled, almost like she was holding her breath. That was the first time I saw the flicker of something. Still, I didn't think much of it. I swabbed, spat, sealed the little tube, and sent it off. Done and dusted. Except, over the next couple of weeks, things started to feel strange. First, Mom called me out of the blue one evening. "Oh, hi," or "How was your day?" She went straight to, "Hey, about that DNA test? You know those things aren't always accurate, right?" I laughed. "It's just for fun, Mom." She hesitated, then said, "Sometimes they cause unnecessary problems. Just remember that." And before I could even respond, she mumbled something about dinner burning and hung up. I remember staring at my phone thinking, what on earth was that about? A few days later, I mentioned the DNA test again while chatting with Dad. He didn't react the way I expected either. Usually he'd be curious, asking what I might find. But instead, he just went very still. Not upset, not angry, just distant. Like I'd suddenly started speaking a language he didn't understand. Was all he said. Then he changed the subject to baseball. I started to feel like maybe I'd stumbled into some family sore spot without realizing it. Then came the comments. I bumped into an old neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, at the grocery store. She was one of those people who'd known me since I was in diapers. We chatted for a while, and then she tilted her head and said, "You know, you've always looked so much like your mother. I remember wondering who you took after from your father's side." I told her I thought I had Dad's chin, but she chuckled and shook her head. "Maybe, but those eyes. Not from him. Not at all." Her words lingered with me for days. By the time the DNA test results email popped into my inbox, my excitement had curdled into something heavier. I stared at the subject line. "Your results are ready." And for the first time, I hesitated. I didn't open it right away. I told myself I was busy. Really, I was scared. Scared of I don't even know what. It's not like I had reason to believe anything was wrong. Except I did. Little things from my childhood started bubbling up in my memory. Like the fact that Mom never talked about Dad's side of the family much, other than his parents. Or how I'd once overheard my aunt and Mom whispering in the kitchen. And when I walked in, they went silent so fast you'd think I'd caught them plotting a bank heist. And then there was this one photo. A faded Polaroid I'd found years ago in a shoebox. Mom was holding me as a baby, but she looked tense. Standing next to her was a man I didn't recognize. He had dark hair, sharp features, and was smiling in a way that felt almost too personal. When I'd asked Mom who he was, she'd said, "Oh, just a friend," and tucked the photo away. I never saw it again. Now with the DNA results just one click away, all those moments started fitting together in a way I didn't like. So I did what any sane person would do when they're nervous. I procrastinated. I made coffee. I scrolled through Instagram. I cleaned the kitchen counters until they were sparkling. But the truth was, the curiosity was eating me alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Dad, his steady hands, his quiet laugh, the way he'd been there for everything. And then, like a cruel little voice in my head, the question whispered, "What if he's not your dad at all?" I hated myself for even thinking it. I felt guilty, like I was betraying him just by wondering. But the next morning, something happened that pushed me over the edge. I called Mom to ask if she'd kept any family medical records. I thought maybe having them would make the DNA thing feel less intimidating. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she finally said, "Sweetheart, I think it's better if you just forget about that test." Her voice cracked on the word forget. That's when my stomach dropped, because up until that moment, I could pretend this was just me overthinking. But now, it felt like she was hiding something. And if there's one thing about me, I can't walk away from a mystery. That evening, I sat down at my laptop. I took a deep breath, and I clicked the email. The screen loaded slowly, like it knew it was about to wreck my life. This is where everything shifts, because the second I saw those results, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The moment the page loaded, my eyes scanned for the fun stuff first. Ancestry percentages, health markers, the quirky little graphs. I was still clinging to the idea that maybe this would just be an interesting trivia moment in my life, not a life-altering one. I saw it right away. 45% Irish, 30% Italian, 20% something Eastern European, and a tiny sliver to 5%. Other. I chuckled. So no Viking warriors after all. But then my eyes drifted down to the section labeled DNA matches. This was supposed to be the part where I'd see familiar names. Cousins. Second cousins. Maybe that one weird uncle who lives in the woods. Instead, the very first match on the list had a label next to it that made my stomach twist. Parent-child 2, 50% DNA shared. It wasn't my dad's name. It was someone I had never heard of in my life. I froze, my brain struggling to compute. Maybe it's an error, I whispered to myself. Maybe the system glitched. I clicked on the profile. A man in his late 50s, with dark hair that had gone mostly gray, smiling at the camera in a way that made me uneasy. His name, Daniel Harper, meant nothing to me. The little info card said he lived in another state, had uploaded his DNA last year, and was open to connecting with relatives. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I scrolled further and there was no sign of my dad anywhere in the matches, not even in the close family section. Which could only mean one thing. Biologically, he wasn't there at all. I sat there for a long moment staring at the screen, my hands trembling on the keyboard. I didn't cry. Not yet. At first I was just numb. My mind was already trying to rationalize it. Maybe Dad had never taken a DNA test, so he didn't show up. Maybe Daniel Harper was some weird fluke. Maybe the lab had switched samples. But even as the excuses formed, another part of me, the quieter, colder part, knew. The truth was right in front of me, and no amount of mental gymnastics was going to make it go away. I pushed back from the desk, stood up, and just started pacing the room. My hands were ice cold, my chest tight. The man I'd loved and trusted my whole life wasn't my father. And if he wasn't my father, then my mother had been lying to me for 30 years. That's when the tears came. Slow at first, then harder, until I was standing in the middle of my living room, ugly crying into my hands. Memories started flooding back, sharper now, almost mocking me. All the times people had commented on how much I looked like my mom and how little like my dad. All the weird silences when family history came up. That mysterious man in the old Polaroid. I thought about calling Dad. My dad, the man who'd raised me. But what would I even say? Hey, by the way, you're not actually my father. The thought made my stomach churn. Instead, I grabbed my phone and called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, cheerful as ever. Hey, sweetheart, how's your day? I didn't bother with small talk. Mom, I got my DNA results. There was a pause. A long, awful pause. Oh, she said finally, her voice careful. There's a man listed as my biological father. His name is Daniel Harper. Do you know him? Silence again. I could hear her breathing on the other end, quick and shallow. Mom, I said, my voice breaking, please don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth. I don't know what I expected. Denial, shock, maybe even anger. But instead, she just sighed. A deep, weary sigh that told me everything before she even said the words. Yes, she whispered. I know him. That was it. That was the confirmation. 30 years of certainty shattered in 2 sentences. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, so Dad isn't my dad. No, she said softly. Not biologically. I had 1,000 questions swirling in my head, but all I could manage was, why didn't you tell me? Her answer was quiet, almost pleading. Because it didn't matter. He loved you. He is your father in every way that counts. I didn't want to hurt you, or him. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my vision blurred. I just mumbled something about needing time and hung up. For the rest of that night, I sat on my couch in silence, staring at the name on the screen. Daniel Harper. Somewhere out there was a man who had given me half my DNA, and I didn't know him. Didn't even know if I wanted to know him. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't just let this sit. This wasn't a question I could ignore. Not anymore. If my mother had been lying to me for 3 decades, I needed to know everything. And that meant confronting her face to face. The day I decided to confront Mom felt like walking into a storm I couldn't turn back from. My heart was pounding in my chest like a drum, and every step toward her house was heavier than the last. When she opened the door, her face was the same warm smile I'd known my whole life, but behind her eyes, I saw something else. A flicker of guilt, or maybe fear. I didn't waste time, Mom. We need to talk. About the DNA test? She nodded slowly, stepping aside to let me in. We sat down in the living room, the same couch I'd sunk into as a kid. The one with the faded floral pattern that had seen better days. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. The test says Daniel Harper is my biological father, not Dad. Her eyes dropped to her hands, twisting the hem of her sweater. I was going to tell you. I promise. I wanted to. But it was never the right time. I felt a surge of anger bubble up, but it was mixed with something deeper. Confusion, betrayal, sadness, all tangled together. Why? Why did you lie to me for so long? For 30 years. She took a shaky breath. Because I loved you and I loved him. Your dad in his own way. Daniel wasn't ready to be a father. He wasn't even aware you existed for a while. Your dad stepped up, took you in, loved you like his own. I thought that was what mattered most. I closed my eyes. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. All those memories, all those years, built on a secret. But you should have told me, I whispered. I deserved to know. I know, she said, tears pooling in her eyes. And I'm sorry I never wanted to hurt you. We talked for hours after that, peeling back layers of a past I'd never known. Mom told me about Daniel Harper, a man from her past, complicated and flawed, who left before I was born. About the pain she felt, the choices she made, and the fear of losing the family she had. She told me how Dad had known some of the truth, but chose to stay, because love isn't always about biology. That night, I realized family is messy. It's not just about who shares your DNA. It's about the people who show up, who stay, who love you when it counts. But it was also about facing the truth, no matter how hard. Because sometimes the biggest lies come from love, and sometimes the hardest truths set you free. After that night with Mom, the truth was out. But somehow, the hardest part was still ahead of me. I knew I had to tell Dad. He was the one who raised me, who wiped my tears, who taught me how to drive and how to grill burgers perfectly. How do you tell someone he's not really your biological father without crushing him? I called him one afternoon. He answered on the second ring, cheerful as always. Hey, champ, what's up? I swallowed hard. Dad, we need to talk. It's important. His voice shifted immediately. Okay, what's going on? When I finally told him about the DNA test, about Daniel Harper, about everything, I heard a pause, then a deep breath. Listen, he said quietly. I've known some of this for a while. That hit me like a freight train. Wait, you knew? He nodded. Not all the details, but I suspected. Your mom told me some years ago. I chose to be your father because you needed one, because I love you. For a moment, the world stopped.
Oh.
The man I had built my life around was telling me he loved me despite the biology. But that didn't make it easier. There were tears, confusion, questions no one could answer. The family rallied. Grandparents, aunts, cousins, and everyone had opinions. Some were supportive, others were judgmental. My relationship with Dad changed that day, but not how I expected. We were both broken, but we chose to heal. Mom and Dad leaned on each other, trying to keep our family intact despite the secrets. Me, I was trying to reconcile the man who raised me with the stranger in the DNA results. It was messy, painful, but real. The weeks after everything came to light felt like I was living in slow motion. You don't just find out your whole life's foundation was built on a lie without your world tilting off its axis. But somehow, amid the chaos, I started to see things more clearly about love, family, and what really makes us who we are. One of the first things I did was reach out to Daniel Harper, the man whose DNA made up half of mine. I was terrified. What if he didn't want to know me? What if he was angry? Or worse, indifferent? But when I sent that first message, the silence was deafening, and after days I almost gave up hope. Then one morning a reply popped up. Hi, I never knew. I'm sorry. I want to meet if you do. That simple message felt like a door opening after years of being shut out. Meeting Daniel was surreal. He was a man with his own scars and regrets, but there was something genuine in his awkward attempts to connect. We talked for hours about the past, about missed chances, and about the future. Uncertain, but hopeful. At the same time, I leaned heavily on the man who raised me. Dad and I rebuilt our relationship on new terms. Raw, maybe, but deeper. He never tried to replace what Daniel might have been, nor did I want him to. He was my dad because he chose to be. I started therapy too, because untangling years of secrets and betrayal wasn't something I could do alone. There were days when the pain felt overwhelming, but there were also days filled with laughter and hope. Family gatherings became different, sometimes awkward, sometimes healing. Mom's honesty in the end, though late, was a step toward mending old wounds. And me, I learned that family isn't just biology. It's love, commitment, and showing up, even when it's hard. Looking back, I realized the truth didn't break us. It freed us. Now, when I look at my son, I don't see a man who lied or a secret kept too long. I see love. Pure, messy, complicated love. But love nonetheless. Because in the end, that's what family really is. Thank you for listening to my story. A story about secrets, lies, but ultimately love. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this. Family isn't always who you expect it to be. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand by you, who pick up the pieces when everything falls apart. And sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that set you free.
Wow.
I look at my son, and I see only love. Not the man who lied, but the truth that set me free.